So you've lost 99% of your wealth generating potential just by paying a 50% tax along the way. Limit your volatility, limit your fees, and if you can defer taxes or limit taxes as much as you can. He said if you invested 100 years ago, $7,253, and you let it sit at 10% interest for 100 years, you'd end up with $100 million. On this episode, I want to talk about something that I took away from the multifamily conference we were at last week. It's a concept, everybody's heard about it, I've heard about it lots, but I thought the presenter did a really good job of breaking down using examples that are very easy to understand how these work. And he was talking about wealth destroyers. So the presenter was on the first day, it was kind of a workshop day. His name's Darren Mitchell. He runs Control and Compound, which they're a company that helps people invest using infinite banking, so using insurance policies. If you've never looked into it, it is a good strategy. I think it's very tax efficient. A lot of rich people do it. You can avoid taxes, and it has some good benefits for sure. But what he was talking about that I want to share today was the wealth destroyers. So there's three of them. It's taxes, which is the biggest one, volatility, and fees. And one of the examples which really just kind of jumped out at me because I thought it was a really good way to describe it was he said if you invested 100 years ago, $7,253, and you let it sit at 10% interest for 100 years, you'd end up with $100 million. So that's the beauty of compounding interest, right? And I think a lot of people get kind of sucked into some of those examples. We've all heard of the penny that doubles every day for a month. You end up with 5.3 million at the end of the month. So he used that example to kind of show how compounding interest works first, and then we'll add stuff in. So then if you add just a 50% tax, you still don't have any volatility or any fees. At the end of the 100 years, you're still in at 10%, but you pay 50% tax. You end up with $1 million. So you've lost 99% of your wealth generating potential just by paying a 50% tax along the way. The next one is fees. So if you pay just a 2% fee, you don't pay any taxes and there's no volatility, you'll end up with 13 million at the end of the 100 years. So it's still a great return. Your 7,000, 13 million, but essentially 87% of your wealth potential went away with just paying that fee. And then the last one is volatility. So if it's invested in stocks and the stock market crashes every 15 years by 40%, so you have a couple volatile years out of the 100, you would end up with $3 million. So again, now you've lost 97% of your earning potential. And the big one is what's more realistic for most people is what if you get hit with all three? So you pay taxes along the way, you have some volatility, and you pay fees. And in that example, if you pay 50% tax, 2% fee, and you have those couple years of volatility, your $7,000 turned into $66,000. So that's a big gap from 100 million, right? And I think that illustrates how important it is to try to do everything you can to limit your volatility, limit your fees, and if you can defer taxes or limit taxes as much as you can. For me, real estate, so it does avoid a lot of that. It's not near as volatile as stocks, and for sure if you're not buying and selling, if you're just long-term buy and hold, it doesn't fluctuate a lot. Usually you do have a pretty steady return. There's a lot of ways to defer taxes, maybe out 5, 10, 15 years. So your money can actually compound a lot more. So I like real estate for that reason. And I think what it also did a good job of explaining or showing was, the power of compound interest is crazy. I mean, once you get to the last couple doubles, it goes pretty quick. But he was showing an example of how a lot of financial advisors, they'll talk about the average, the stock market averages 7% returns. And people use that and then think that their money's getting the 7% a year every single year and compounding like that. And the volatility part is what gets you. So if you took an example, if you invested $100,000 and you had 100% return one year and you lost 50 the next, then you gained 100 and then you lost 50 the next, your average return, your average rate of return would be 25%, the way they calculate it. But your real return would be zero. Your 100,000 would have went to 200,000, back to 100, up to 200, back to 100. So the average rate of return doesn't always apply when you add volatility in, right? So you have to look at what the actual return is. And he used an example of a client that had came to him. They invested $250,000 with a financial advisor who had told them, the stock market always returns 7%. It's 7.3 or 7.1. So they had just ran the math, and in 20 years, he was going to have $1 million. Well, this guy obviously paid taxes along the way. He paid fees, and they had up and down years. And between the years of the 2000 and 2020, when he pulled the money out, his $250,000, which was supposed to grow to $1 million, had only went up $75,000 after he paid the fees, the taxes, and had the volatile years. So the stock market over that amount of time did average 7%, but because of volatility and all those other things, the actual return's a lot less. So it's something that you really got to be cautious of when you're building out a financial plan for retirement. That guy was planning to retire on $1 million or have that extra 750,000, and now he's got 75,000. Pretty hard to retire on that, right? So the fees, the taxes, the volatility, anything you can do to eliminate that or really slow that down goes a long ways. And again, for myself, real estate checks most of those boxes. I mean, it's a lot less volatile for sure. If there's distributions being paid out, you can defer taxes out a long time. Usually it's return of capital that comes out first. That's how our fund does it. Our distribution comes out as return of capital. So until you get all your money back, you're not paying any taxes. And then we have depreciation from the building to eat up the operating expenses on that side. So it's not tax free, but you're able to defer taxes out, and it allows your money to compound without paying 40% of taxes every year along the way. And you can pay the taxes at the end when your money's been able to grow to its full potential. So the tax portion's a big one, and then just the stability of it, right? Multifamily is one of the most stable assets you can be in. Generally, even if the price of the building fluctuates, with the market, there'll be down years, there'll be up years. But if the buildings generally cash flow throughout that, so you don't have the same fluctuations as a market unless you're selling and buying all the time. So for me, it kind of checks all the boxes. But I just thought it was a really cool example, broke down really easily. Like I said, I'm going to try to get Darren on the podcast. He said he would when I chatted with him after the show. So I'm excited for that. That's it for today's episode. Hopefully it was helpful. You guys can look at your financial plan and make something work. Make sure you're calculating in there what happens when you start paying taxes and fees, and what happens if there's volatile years. Don't just rely on the average return the market's going to give you if it's in mutual fund or whatever you have your money invested in. So make sure you're getting the full picture. Anyways, thanks for today. Like always, if you guys subscribe, like, share it with a friend, goes a long ways getting us out to new people. We'll see you guys in a couple weeks.